What we do here matters, because what we don't do matters even more.
We need to continue to push, and we at ADAO are going to continue to push the Surgeon General of the United States.
As you know, the United States continues to use asbestos, and that indeed is a barrier to others stopping its use.
The most horrific part of this whole story is that it is preventable.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Linda, again for persevering and pushing forward. I've been working with you for it's almost 8 years now. You believe that? So I'm always glad to have the opportunity to speak at this conference and to see more and more of my friends from EIA coming over and showing support. I think it's very important that these communities work together. Let's see. How do we get to, well, I'd like to, how do we, go to the full screen there.
That's why I had Linda.
Okay. All right. What I'm going to talk about, I'm a geologist, I'm an electron microscopist, and I've talked to you before about what asbestos is, how we analyze it. We've kind of covered that today and in other presentations before, so I'm going to move on to what happens when you can't leave it alone. What happens when disaster strikes? There are times where we can't help but disturb asbestos because nature runs its course. In commercial buildings, the EPA estimates that there are 31,000 schools, 733,000 other public and commercial buildings in this country in which asbestos materials can be found. That's 17% of the 4.5 million commercial buildings in the U.S. And about 2/3 of those buildings. Some of the asbestos is damaged, like we saw just a minute ago. And almost half have what we would judge as EPA inspectors significantly damaged asbestos. So this means that when you're walking down the street, 1 out of every 6 public buildings has asbestos in it. 1 out of every 12 has significantly damaged asbestos-containing building materials. And we keep showing the slides of the towers falling down. There was 400 tons of asbestos-containing material in these buildings when they collapsed. And what were we told? What were we told by the authorities? We were told that there's no immediate health risk. Go back to your homes. No immediate health risk. Okay, we've talked about asbestos in your home. That's certainly a home that would be a nice candidate, judging from its styling, right? 80 million of the 100 million private homes in America were built before 1980, so may contain asbestos. EPA estimated that 940,000 American homes contain just the specific product, WR Grace Zonalite attic insulation. An estimated 34 million homes in America contain some amount of asbestos, which is about the same number as the number of households in this country where we have a right to bear arms that contain guns. Annette Funicello once said, "When you're young and healthy, it never occurs to you that in a single second, your whole life can change." Earthquakes happen. This was an earthquake in the Midwest that knocked this man's ceiling down. You can see the insulation falling down into his living room. Does he know about asbestos and what to do with it? Fires can certainly cause asbestos release. As a matter of fact, well, this is not the same PowerPoint. Oh well. I'll just tell you that when I lived in California, we certainly had earthquakes a lot. We would have earthquakes that would not only tear down buildings, but it would cause release of asbestos-containing fireproofing. When I lived in Alaska, it's one of the most tectonically active regions in the country. Every time we had an earthquake, we had to run out and take air samples because asbestos would get released. It actually is quite common in tectonically active areas. Fires. Again, in California, I had a friend by the name of Chris Anaya, some of you know him, who is a fireman. And he's also very concerned about naturally occurring asbestos because he lives in El Dorado Hills in California. There's lots of asbestos in the soil and the rock. They're building on this naturally occurring asbestos, and they have fires on this naturally occurring asbestos. And as a fireman, he tries to tell his fellow firemen, when you go into fires in these places, you need to be wearing the appropriate gear. You need to wear your scuba gear, even if it's not for smoke. You need to worry about asbestos. But his bosses and the other fire chiefs told him, you don't want to do that because of public perception. But the good excuse was because you can't see. If you're wearing scuba gear, you can't see any hazards that might occur. So when we're talking about natural disasters, we're not thinking about exposure. We're thinking about saving ourselves and taking care of what's just fallen down. Our home, our car is squished. Linda was kind enough to share this picture of the damage from the tornado in Joplin, Missouri in 2011, where 2,600 tons of asbestos were removed. So this creates potential for significant exposure. Even drought can lead to exposure. The drought in Houston caused the asbestos-containing pipes that underlay the streets to start to fail because they weren't full and they were old, so they started to fall apart. What did they do? They sent their guys out, and Linda was instrumental in making sure the story got out about what happened. They sent me some pieces of debris that were out in the street where the workers were breaking up the pipe and to see if it might actually have asbestos, to confirm what another lab had seen. And as you can see, there were fibers of asbestos, both chrysotolite and chrysotile, in abundance in this material. So were they wearing any worker protection? No, they weren't. Now, was this a direct result of a disaster? Well, yes, because the drought created the damage. But the real disaster there was the complete lack of consideration to treat it as asbestos-containing material. Okay, so going back to disasters, in the last 20 years, 4.4 billion people in the world have been affected by disasters in one way or another, with China leading with 2.5 billion people affected. Deaths from disaster hit a whopping 1.3 million deaths in the last 20 years, with Haiti, earthquakes in Haiti being a leader there with 230,000 deaths from natural disaster. Well, what about the financial damage? How about $2 trillion with the U.S. leading in the amount of dollars spent in disaster recovery? If we actually look at just the presidential declarations of disasters, we see that there's a lot of floods and water damage, tornado damage, but the actual number is something like 1,500 disasters from 1964 to 2007, which comes out to about an average of 3 disasters every month. And the number of disasters is increasing. Anybody that's followed the stories about global warming has heard. As a geologist, I consider the last couple of hundred years to be relatively calm when you look at the earth movements and the water movements and the number of storms we're seeing. What you can actually see in the record is that we're having an increase through time. Now, certainly before 1960, we didn't really report disasters and track them very well. So maybe that tail of our curve isn't that considerable. But still, if you actually look at the number and think about what that translates to on an annual basis, we've gone from having some sort of tragic event, earth-shaking event, potentially asbestos-disturbing event, from back when I was a child to happening maybe once a week, to now happening on a daily basis. Over 365 days in a year, over 360 disasters per year. Hurricane Sandy certainly created some involvement with ADAO because it did a lot of damage. It's a very significant event and has a potential to disturb a lot of material. Here are several homes that were destroyed in New Jersey. 72,000 homes were decimated in New Jersey alone. But if we look south, that same storm actually damaged homes in the hundreds of thousands. Another storm headed in toward our coast. This is the infamous Katrina, grinding its way toward New Orleans. And here's what people do. Your house falls down, you're a good Boy Scout, you go out and you get a paper mask because you know there might be a problem. Of course, that paper mask, for every fiber outside, it has a fiber inside. It has a respiratory protection factor of what? 1? Not even considerable. But you do what you can. So if we look at if we compare those two storms alone, there was 1.2 million housing units damaged by Katrina, 305,000 in Sandy, 72,000 buildings damaged in Connecticut by Sandy, with a very significant cost. But again, when it happens, it's a disaster. And what do you think about when a disaster occurs? Well, when the disaster is a diagnosis of mesothelioma, it's completely different from your house falling down. You think about the same things, the immediacy, taking care of your family. You don't think about the fibers that you're breathing. So in conclusion, asbestos is in our schools, our shops, our workplaces, and in the soil on which we walk, the water that we drink, and the air that we breathe. Regardless of whether by natural geologic change or the actions of man, catastrophic disasters are increasing in frequency and intensity. As the forces of natural disaster amplify the contributions of nature and man to asbestos exposure, awareness is our greatest, if not our only, defense. Simply put, wartime is not the time to learn to shoot a gun. Thank you.